Golden lace letters, as if crafted from molten metal, stood out brightly against the dark matte background. A long, sharp arrow pierced through each letter, as if it had been released with inhuman force and fury. The small subscript font casually hinted at the year of production, as if sharing its secret with the most curious connoisseurs. The entire design languidly conveyed the considerable value of this exquisite beverage. I held a bottle of wine in my hand and closely examined its label. The long and sustained sound of an ambulance passing by somewhere nearby brought my thoughts back to the surrounding reality. I stood near a small 2-story house that harmoniously blended into the surroundings. Around it was a perfectly manicured, brightly green lawn, as if made of velvety grass that exuded freshness and invited relaxation and enjoyment of nature. A gentle breeze playfully rustled the green leaves of the trees, creating a melodic whisper that perfectly fit into this atmosphere of tranquility and harmony. Everything outside looked like a perfect scene for some commercial. I dissolved into a feeling of peace and goodness, as if someone had wrapped me in a warm down blanket and softly sang a lullaby. It was impossible to resist these feelings. I was invited to dinner by my new neighbors, a family that recently moved here. I knew they were reserved and mysterious people, and dinner became a great opportunity to get to know them better. I was extremely curious to ask them about the reasons why they decided to move to our remote corner. They seemed like a typical perfect family, or at least that's how it appeared. The head of the family, around 40 years old, his wife and 2 adorable children, a boy who was approximately 10 years old, and his sister who looked a couple of years younger. They were quite religious people who never missed a Sunday service at our church. I pressed the doorbell several times, expecting someone to open the door and let me in. Strange sounds of unintelligible mumbling and some commotion came from behind the door. Quick footsteps, muffled sounds of dull thuds, and clearly aggressive whispering. All the confidence and calmness I felt earlier started to fade away, replaced by a sense of confusion and concern. I stood in front of the door for a while, not understanding what was happening inside. The space around me seemed to shrink and darken, engulfing the previous feelings of comfort and coziness. I felt a chill on my skin, as if sensing something unpleasant. The door creaked open, and I was greeted by the homeowner. Despite all the previous strange sounds, she appeared very friendly and smiled widely at me. Perhaps her face was too joyful, and her eyes looked at me too intently, as if not even blinking. With a welcoming and graceful gesture, she invited me to enter the house and follow her. In the spacious dining room, the head of the family and the children sat around a large table. They greeted me silently and indicated my seat. Not daring to disturb the almost perfect silence, I sat at the table. Maybe it was their tradition or something related to their religion, I thought. Perhaps it was a special ritual or symbolic act with deep spiritual significance. We started our meal with light appetizers and salads that had been thoughtfully prepared in advance. I felt a bit awkward sitting in complete silence. Perhaps it was impolite on my part not to introduce myself properly and express gratitude for the invitation, considering it as an excellent opportunity to establish good neighborly relations. Nevertheless, it seemed that nothing troubled this family. Directly across from me sat the head of the family, with the boy and girl on either side of the table. Their mother sat closest to me. They all were clearly in a great mood, smiling and exchanging glances with each other. The girl was animatedly swinging her legs under the table, and her brother seemed to be humming a strange tune. For a moment, it seemed like they knew something that I didn't. I finally mustered the courage to start the conversation. But as soon as my voice pierced the silence of the room, all the carefree movement around the table abruptly ceased, and all 4 of them turned their heads towards me simultaneously and swiftly. They stared at me without blinking, their faces tense and stern. Grave silence fell once again, and a tangible electric tension hung in the air. It reminded me of that moment when, connecting wires, you feel the intangible energy vibrating in the air, ready to burst through the closed circuit at any moment. It was that kind of silence when you can hear your own heartbeat. Unexpectedly, the woman raised her glass, as if offering everyone a drink. I felt relieved and, swallowing the lump in my throat, took the crystal glass with a tall stem. It was filled with a dark burgundy drink with a pleasant bitter aroma. I took a few big sips and felt somewhat calmer. As soon as the glasses were placed back on the table, the hostess immediately stood up and headed towards the kitchen. Apparently, she was about to bring the main dish, I thought. Feeling slightly more relaxed, I returned to my food, trying not to pay attention to all the strange happenings. I stared at my plate and quickly worked the fork. I ate and ate. Suddenly, I felt a strange metallic and iron taste in my mouth. Not understanding what was happening, I ran my tongue along my palate and teeth. There was something strange in my mouth. Out of reflex, I made a few more chewing movements until I fully sensed a sticky and warm substance. I felt bitterness spreading in my mouth and immediately realized it was the taste of blood. At that very moment, something the size of a pea ended up on my tongue, and I spat it out onto the plate. Oh my God, it was a small piece of bloody glass. I looked at the plate, and horror pierced through my body. My entire salad was mixed with shards of glass. All this time I had been chewing broken glass. I grabbed my glass, hoping to take a few sips and rinse my mouth. But in the same second, an unknown premonition made me tear my gaze away from the plate and look at those who were sitting at the table. All three of them were staring at me with glassy eyes and gruesome smiles. Their faces were covered in blood, and thick red drops were dripping from their chins. Their plates, clothes, napkins, and the table, everything was covered in bright crimson blood. They were grinning and giggling, clearly enjoying my panic and fear. Stunned by what I saw, I dropped my glass from my hands. The sound of glass shattering echoed throughout the room. The glass shattered into pieces. My head began to spin with terror, and it was difficult for me to maintain my balance. I started to break out in cold sweat. The noise in my ears grew louder, and the air seemed more and more thin. I knew I urgently needed to do something, but my thoughts were slowed down by horror, and I couldn't gather myself. Women's hands delicately placed a large, beautiful dish on the table right in front of me. It was filled with pieces of golden meat, vegetables, and potatoes. Steam tongues rose above its surface. But what is this? Nausea and madness overwhelmed me. In the center of the dish, on top of the ingredients, there lay an eye, a human eye. In that very moment, the room filled with sinister laughter. It emanated from this dreadful family. Their voices sounded deep and piercing, like echoes in an abyssal cave. The sound was so loud that it made the walls tremble, and I couldn't help but succumb to that infernal mad laughter that drowned out everything else. My consciousness faded away,